Welcome to another episode of MissTrial. We are so thrilled to have you come back and listen and watch our podcast, MissTrial, where we talk about all things at the intersection of law, politics, all the things that are going on right now. I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo. I'm here with Kathleen Rice, who is former Congresswoman, former elected district attorney. I'm a former prosecutor. And Danya Perry's on the road again this week, so she can't be here, but we are so thrilled to have a special guest, Jen Rubin, who, when Jen said yes to be on MissTrial, I was jumping for joy, so excited. Jen, you have one of the most incredible resumes. And in addition to being a really somebody that everybody goes to when you read the Washington Post, one of the first places I go always is to see what Jen Rubin has to say. Just so you do deep dives into all the issues that are so important, and you're such a critical thinker. You also have an incredible podcast called Jen Rubin's Green Room. You're a blogger. You are an MSNBC contributor. And what I didn't realize when I was kind of prepping for this, because I've known you, I've relied on you, I've gone to everything that's Jen Rubin for years now. But what I had no idea about is that you are not only, I knew you went to law school, I knew you were a lawyer. I didn't know you practiced law for a long time, actually.
Yes.
You're not one of these people who just went to law school and became a columnist. You practiced law for decades, but on top of that, you're a former Republican. I mean, I had no idea we could spend this entire episode just talking about you and your journey from lawyer to journalist, from Republican to Democrat. I mean, and I want to talk about the issues of the day, but I have to ask you first about that. I mean, tell us.
Which part, the lawyer part or the Republican part?
Everything.
Everything.
Well, I'll start with the lawyer part since that's easy. I did practice law for 20 years in Los Angeles. I was a labor lawyer. For a time, I was at a big firm, and then I worked for the Hollywood studios. So I did both employment law, which for those of you who are not lawyers is terminations, discipline, discrimination lawsuits, compliance with all the various state and federal labor laws. But I also was the company's representative at collective bargaining negotiations. So every union you can think of, from the directors union to the Teamsters, were the folks that we dealt with across the table. I had a lot of fun at it. I enjoyed it. But after time, when I had two small kids, I felt like I wasn't enjoying their life and wasn't enjoying my life. So my husband and I decided to move cross country. At that time, I had no expectation I was going to be a journalist, and we were simply going to move. We've settled in Washington, D.C. He has a sister who's local here. We always loved the area. Great public schools, great things to do with your kids, great area. And I was a stay-at-home mom for a while. And then I was just noodling around and decided to write a story about Mitt Romney. I recalled when he was the governor of Massachusetts, he was this progressive guy. He was the kind of Republican I was, which was pro-choice, fiscally conservative, but kind of a no-nonsense guy. And here he was running, at least for the first time, 2008, as this rock rib pro-life Republican. So I said, this can't be right. And I just decided to kind of write on it. I had no no purchaser at the other end. I just decided I was going to do a piece. And I remember being on the phone with whoever, and they asked, who are you writing this for? And I shouted to my husband in the other room, who am I writing this for? And he said, say you're doing it freelance. And I said, I'm doing it freelance. And I wrote a piece, the Weekly Standard, which was then in operation, which was a sane conservative journal, picked it up, and the story then got picked up by the New York Times, by CBS. It was the first real deep dive into how Romney had transformed himself from a progressive governor into this pseudo movement conservative. And I thought to myself, this isn't that hard. after being a lawyer, I can do this. You just call people up on the phone, you do some research, you write up things, you make an argument, and you sell it to people. And it's a little harder than that, but not much harder. And frankly, as you know, being a lawyer is much harder than being a journalist. Every fact you have has to be backed up. Every I dotted, every T crossed. And it's not that journalists can be sloppier. It's just that the standard of proof and the amount of due diligence in tying every assertion, particularly on the opinion side, is not as exacting. You also work a lot harder as a lawyer. So people have always said, oh, you're so productive, you write so much. And my attitude has been, well, what are you going to do with the other 14 hours of the day other than work? So it was a really fun transition. It allowed me to stay at home, to work mostly from home, although some traveling and obviously going to events and so on. But it turned out to be a great career shift. I'm a much better journalist than I was a lawyer, I'll be honest. And the great thing about my job now is I get to interact with great lawyers like Karen, like all of the people we consult with, like all of the people I regularly cite in my pieces. So I feel like, in a way, I'm a lawyer at heart still. And I think if you're a lawyer and you look at my work, you can kind of tell that I was a lawyer once, because I write in a very straightforward, here's the thesis, here are the points, here's the backup, here's the conclusion. It's
that's why it's funny because I've always been attracted to your writing, and I guess that's why it's what I'm used to. So
exactly.
Tell us,
it's like writing a brief.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us about this transition from Republican to not a Republican.
Yes. Well, to put things in perspective, I graduated high school in 1979. So this was the end of the Carter era. And people think back, really, the Democrats were in poor shape then. They had really not capitalized, frankly, on Watergate. Jimmy Carter at that stage was considered a bit of a failed president. Republicans had captured the issue of the Cold War, which was very important to me, being tough on the Soviets, human rights, support for dissidents around the world. Those were all Republican issues that ranked very highly. And I was attracted to a free market agenda, to free trade, to robust immigration. I know you're all thinking, was this the Republican Party back then? And hence the switch. And so I was never, what they call a movement conservative. That is someone who was, anti-abortion, anti-gay rights. But I was fiscally conservative. I was for a very strong international profile for the United States, strong on national security. And although not everything in the Republican Party appealed to me, a fair amount did. And I was fairly comfortable there for a while. Now, as things progressed, there was always an element in the Republican Party that was, frankly, a product of the old Southern Democrats. And this element has always run through American politics. We had the do-nothings in the 19th century. We had the Southern Democrats, and this strain of populism, of, quote, states' rights, of anti-government animus was always present in the Republican Party, but it had never dominated. And so I was really comfortable voting for people like Mitt Romney and like John McCain, who I really idolized as, I thought, someone who epitomized self-sacrifice and public duty. So I didn't have a problem with it. And frankly, I think I deluded myself into thinking that these people were a less significant portion of the Republican Party than they turned out to be. Well, along comes Donald Trump, and this is just beyond belief for me. It immediately set off every trigger. As a American Jew, I immediately perked up my ears when I hear people talking about immigrants as murderers, as rapists. When you start talking about the generals doing your bidding. And if you remember, he was telling them they were going to commit war crimes in his name. So the red lights are flashing. I immediately knew that this guy was something malicious. And frankly, I was so naive as to think the Republicans were going to reject this guy. How could they embrace someone who really stood for everything Republicans did not? He was isolationist. He was anti-immigrant. He certainly wasn't a fiscal conservative. Every precept that had attracted me to the Republican Party, he rejected. And so when the Republican Party essentially rolled over and accepted this guy, I wrote what I refer to as my Dear John letter to the Republican Party, which was a piece that said, I'm out of here, guys. I cannot accept this. This is beyond acceptable. This is anti-American, anti-democratic. And that was the break. And since then, I have found a comfortable spot within the Democratic Party. I like to think of myself as a Abigail Spanberger Democrat or a Joe Biden Democrat, and frankly now a Kamala Harris Democrat. I am progressive on issues like gay rights and like a woman's right to choose. I think Kamala Harris is exactly right. These are issues of freedom, and we don't want an invasive government telling you what to do. Frankly, Democrats are now the internationalists. They're the ones who are strong on human rights. They're the ones who are defending Ukraine. Republicans have adopted this weird fascist isolationism. Democrats, frankly, are the ones talking about opportunity and empowering individuals to achieve their American dream. So it has not been that I have reversed everything. I feel like the world has switched in front of me. And what has amazed me are the number of people who I used to consider principled Republicans, who are patriotic, who believed in the rule of law, who have gone along with this shit show and have now rationalized, embraced Donald Trump. So, although it's been quite a journey for me, I can tell people on both sides, Democrats are a lot more fun. They have better food. They have better taste in music. They're more interesting to be with. And I think they, whether they have changed to some degree and I have changed to some degree, I have found, I think, a comfortable spot politically. And it's upset a lot of people along the way. I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost a lot of readers who or gotten different readers instead. So it's been quite a journey. And what these two major shifts in my life have taught me, and I have thought from time to time about writing a more autobiographical book. I've written a nonfiction book, not focused on myself, is that you can change. Grown up, mature, intelligent people look at the world around them and they say, I'm not happy, or this isn't right, or I don't have to be this way, or I don't have to identify with this group. And you can change. Nothing says you have to be a lawyer your whole life if you don't like being a lawyer. Nothing says you have to stay in a political party when that party becomes, frankly, disfigured, grotesque, un-American. You can change. And so I've had these two major reversals in my life, or shifts in my life. And I look back and sometimes I think it's kind of extraordinary, but here I am.
Wow, fascinating. I feel like Kathleen and I can relate to you a lot, just in terms of, Kathleen was an elected DA in Nassau County, New York. She was a member of Congress who was there on January 6th. And now, and now she's a recovered public servant in the private sector, kind of like I am, and a podcaster. And it's just a whole new journey.
Yes.
And I can totally relate, and I'm sure Kathleen, you can too. Kathleen, I want to hear your reaction to this, just because I feel like some of this reminds me of you a little bit.
I just have so many questions, Jen. I'm so grateful to have you here, and I'm so grateful for your voice. Just for a little background, I ran for the first time. Carolyn McCarthy was my congresswoman from Long Island. She retired. She came to me and said, I want you to run for my seat. I was the sitting DA in Nassau County. I had never thought about running for Congress, but because of my position as DA, I had a lot to complain about the way things were going in Washington. And so I thought, you know what, if I'm not going to put up, I should just shut up. And so I ran. So I started in Washington in January of 2015. So I was there for the last 2 years of Obama. And to your point about what the Republican Party used to be, there were two major pieces of legislation that Obama was trying to get across the finish line in those final 2 years. It was the JCPOA, the agreement on Iran, which I voted against. Okay. And sometimes you have to do that. He was the president of my party, right? The president who was a Democrat like me. But I voted the way I believe my constituents wanted me to vote on that. I was with him 1,000% on trade. And I was one of only 28 Democrats at that time. He and the Republicans were the ones trying to get, to set the rules of the road in a part of the world that our absence would have allowed China to take over. And they needed to find Democratic votes. So to your point about like what, and by the way, this was 9 years ago. This wasn't 25 years ago. Exactly. It was 9 years ago. So that, and then so many questions. I isolate them to two. You wrote a book called Resistance, in the aftermath of the election of Donald Trump. And you titled it "How Women Saved Democracy from Donald Trump." And I would just love for you to comment on, yes, they showed up in big numbers because Nancy Pelosi became the speaker again in that midterm, right? Women voters came out in droves and they soundly rejected the Trump agenda. Do you see women playing that same role in 2024?
Absolutely. And the book looked at not only the results, but what happened to women as a result of Trump's election. And it was a very similar pattern. There was a woman in Midland, Michigan. There was a woman in Chesterfield County, in Virginia, a woman in Los Angeles. I interviewed these people. These people all went through a period of shock and grieving when Trump was elected. And what they did was they reached out to their women friends. And after a very short period of time, they said, well, let's do something. And they began forming these networks, these political networks, these social networks. That's how Indivisible began. Leah Greenberg and her husband, to give him credit as well, started very small. They put out a Google document and suddenly they had 17,000 Americans who were game to join the resistance. And of course, the Women's March gave people the sense of purpose, the sense of belonging, sense of community. And so what the book did was kind of trace those relationships and how people expanded their vision. I remember interviewing a woman in Alabama, and I had this kind of vision of this sort of driving Miss Daisy figure, this very prim and proper Alabama woman. And she was so incensed, she teamed up with the local HBCU to make sure all those kids got registered. She went down to the border to protest the separation of children. And I thought, this is what has happened. Women have become electrified. They've become infuriated. They understand they can't be on the sidelines anymore. And I think that process redoubled after Dobbs. I think the exact same thing happened. And the press has never understood how absolutely infuriating, how motivating that is. They keep kind of treating it like an issue, but they don't understand how women have interpreted that and what it has done to them politically. And I think in the exact same way that Donald Trump's initial election galvanized women, Dobbs has done that again. And we see that in all of the data. Registrations, the massive wins for any abortion measure that protects women's rights or voting against a measure that doesn't, in very red states with overwhelming support from women, Republican women, independent women, Democratic women. So I feel that women have always played a critical role. It's very typical, frankly, of social justice movements that women are front and center because they feel the burden of a state. It's very interesting in the Polish election when they threw out their very right-wing government, women and abortion rights were front and center in that election as well. So it's like when you are pregnant, you see all the other pregnant women. Once you see this, you see the pattern everywhere else, and you see the role that women play. Now, African-American women have always been the mainstay of the Democratic Party. They are the demographic group that votes the most, and that's because they've got the most to lose. They understand the importance of politics. They don't treat it like a game. They don't treat it as a way of expressing rage or any other emotion. They are playing for keeps. And the effort has been to galvanize white women in the same way. Unfortunately, many white women have prioritized race over gender. In other words, they have voted to maintain their kind of cultural, social connections and what they think is in their economic interest over issues of gender, of equality, of social justice, and the rest. I think that is changing. And I think Kamala Harris has very effectively galvanized women across the board. I don't know about you gals, but I thought her 3 sit-down sessions with Liz Cheney on that Monday were so impressive. Here were 2 intelligent women talking about issues, talking respectfully, talking about their love of America. And I loved that moment when Liz Cheney said, I'm pro-life, but it is wrong that women cannot get treatment and spare their health and their lives because of these bans. Now, Kamala Harris could have said, well, what did you think was going to happen? This is what we have been warning about. But she said, well, I think many Republican women feel that way, and we need to join together. She graciously opened the door. Liz Cheney had the magnanimity and the openness and the courage to say, this is a problem. I don't care what my philosophical soulmates are still calling about. I see a problem. Here again, I see facts. I see the world. I can change. I understand. And I thought this is the best of what we can have in American politics. First of all, women. And secondly, that here's an intelligent conversation that you can think through problems. The problem, women are dying. Forget the party labels. Forget what other ideology. What are we going to do about that? What caused that, huh? And what isn't the solution to allow women and doctors to make these sorts of decisions? So that was inspirational to me. And I think that is happening across the board. I love the line that Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris have now adopted, telling women, you know, you can vote in the sanctity of the voting booth. That is your private decision. And I think they are banking on a lot of women just marking the ballot in the ballot box as their husband go off to their next MAGA rally and saying, hell, I'm not going to vote for that guy. So I do think—
Well, to that point, Jen, do you think, I mean, how much weight do you give to polls? Because, you know, first of all, I know Liz Cheney. I served with her. And for anyone to doubt that she loves her country, she was one of the most conservative members of the House. Yes. And I don't think people appreciate what it took for her to say, I am supporting this candidate because I am putting country, like John McCain, before self. Yes. So, like, are the polls wrong? Are women, you know, is this country ready to elect a woman? Because as a woman having her name on the ballot, we have so many obstacles thrown in our way, trying to get our name on the ballot to run for public office and serve our country. And I got into elected politics 20 years ago, and it's still, you know, you look at her resume, and if she were a former male vice president, it wouldn't even be an issue. Don't get me started. I just wanted to throw that out.
Before you answer that question, Jen, I have to call for our next, our first ad break, because we have these pro-democracy sponsors who have chosen us, who have chosen this podcast to want to sponsor. And so we have to support them. We love them. And we're going to call for our first ad break, but hold on, because we have to talk about, I want your answer to that question. There's so much more we want to talk about. And in particular, In particular, you have been taking on your boss, Jeff Bezos, a little bit at the Washington Post for their decision not to endorse a candidate. So that is what I can't wait to talk about as well. But we're going to take our first break. You heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. So my life goals in my career and beyond require productivity, as you can imagine. But let's be honest, the aging process is not our friend. And when it comes to having the energy that I need to do all the things that I'm doing and productivity, I use Qualia Senolytics. So if someone would have told me that there was a science-backed ingredient that could help me feel 15 years younger in a matter of months, I wouldn't have believed it. But then I tried Qualia Senolytic. And now as we age, those zombie cells, they're called, or senescent cells that our body accumulates, they're sort of worthless, and they accumulate and cause aging, and they're sort of old, worn out cells, and they cause these symptoms of aging like aches and discomfort, slow workout recoveries, sluggish mental and physical energy. And it's like this weird, middle-aged feeling, whatever you want to call it. So it's almost like pruning a tree, the dead leaves off a plant. Qualia Senolytic removes those worn out cells, those senescent cells, to allow for the rest of your cells to thrive in your body. And you just have to do it 2 days a month. The first time I read that, I thought, is that a typo? But it's really just 2 days a month. So this formula is non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and the ingredients are meant to complement one another, factoring in the combined effect of all the ingredients together. There's a 100-day money-back guarantee. It's clinically tested 2-day rejuvenation regimen, and it might hold the key to unlocking your cellular health and revitalizing aging tissues throughout your body. And I really highly recommend that you give it a try. Since I started using Qualia Senolytic, I've had higher energy levels. I feel much younger, and I feel much more productive, enthusiastic, and my brain just feels more sharp, and I have less aches and pains. So resist aging at the cellular level like I do. Try Qualia Senolytic. Go to qualialife.com/MissTrial for up to 50% off, and use code MissTrial at checkout for an additional 15% off. For your convenience, Qualia Senolytic is also available at select GNC locations near you. That's QUALIA life.com/MissTrial for an extra 15% off. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode. Enhance your everyday with Via. Via is a company dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. From setting the mood in the bedroom to chilling out after a long day, Via has something for you. With award-winning THC and THC-free gummies, Via has a dosage to encourage your comfort. No need to block off hours of the day for an unproductive high when you can experience the full spectrum of benefits from cannabis and hemp products with a microdose of THC to give you the little boost without compromising your responsibilities. Via is also well renowned for their premier indoor THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops, all crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. The THCA flower strains are grown with care and rigorously tested to ensure the highest quality, free from harsh pesticides or nasty chemicals. Via is constantly adding new strains to its website every week, as they're always receiving fresh new strains from their independent farms' harvests. And the best part, Via legally ships to all 50 states in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee, no medical card required. It's trusted by over 500,000 happy customers for their wellness needs, and Via is the brand everyone's raving about. So if you're 21 or older, check out our link to Via's website in our description for 15% off. What I love most are the health benefits provided by their hemp products, especially the CBD. So unlock the power of nature with Via's organic and vegan hemp extracts, perfect for relaxation and rejuvenation. Via is the only lifestyle hemp brand. They use compounds found in hemp along with active plant extracts to create products, each with a specific effect in mind, whether you want to get better sleep, ease anxiety, enhance your mood, they have something for you. They also have 0 THC products. If THC isn't for you, you can still take advantage of their CBD line with products designed for sleep. That's the one I love. Focus and energy that will keep you glowing. Their products range from 0 milligrams to 100 milligrams of THC. So these guys have you covered, whether you're looking to microdose or enjoy more potent effects. They're an industry leader with over 500,000 customers served, made and farmed in the USA, crafted with care. They have award-winning service, quality ingredients. They're affordable and accessible. And if you're 21 or over, check out the link to VIA in our description and use the code MissTrial to receive 15% off after you purchase. They will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them MissTrial with 2 S's sent you. Enhance your everyday with VIA. All right, we're back. I rudely interrupted Jen Rubin, who is here, and Kathleen asked this incredibly incisive question about women in politics and Liz Cheney. And Jen, this is so fascinating. I am just enraptured by every word that's coming out of your mouth about all of this. And I'm sorry we had to take a quick break, but we do love our pro-democracy sponsors. So please continue. I apologize for having to take that break.
Absolutely. I know very well. We love our sponsors in the podcast world. So absolutely. Kathleen also asked about polls. I am, not because they haven't gone my way, but I have become a huge skeptic of polls. First of all, polls months and months before an election are patently ridiculous. They have the caveat that this is just a slice in time. This is if the election were held today. Well, the election is not held today. So what possible meaning is it? News outlets treat them like news, and they use them as cheap ways of, quote, reporting and getting clicks and making the story into a horse race rather than an examination of policy, of values, of democracy. I think an excessive amount of time is spent. And even as you get closer to an election, I have high levels of skepticism. Remember the red wave that was coming? Well, it didn't come. Now, some people will say that's because there were a lot of junk polls that right-wing and Republican groups dumped into these poll averages. Well, then why didn't you screen them out, I guess is the answer. But more importantly, polls have to assume a certain turnout profile. You can't just call up 50 people and say that's your poll. You have to wait and you have to do an estimation as to who is going to turn out and in what numbers. And I don't think they have figured this out. They didn't figure it out in 2016. They didn't figure it out in 2020. They didn't really figure it out in 2022. And that's because people and politics have really gotten shaken up. People who didn't used to vote are voting. Women are voting much more strongly Democratic than ever before with much more intensity. It's not only that they identify as Democrats, they're much more likely to show up and vote. So you're getting in an election, an electorate that sometimes looks 55% of women. That's extraordinary. And that's an extraordinary boost for Democrats because women are more Democratic than men are. So I think polling is broken. And worse, I think the analysis of polling is completely wrongheaded and misleading. When you see a 1% shift in a poll that already has a margin of error of 3, that is statistically non-significant. It means nothing. And instead you get headlines, race tightening, Harris in trouble, Harris loses her lead. That's wrong. It's false. It's misleading. It's non-news. Stop it. That's my attitude. So I've been very vocal in my criticism of polls. And I'm not a hypocrite. I don't say, oh, well, here's a good one for Kamala. I'm going to believe in that one and, tout that one. I think it doesn't add anything. What difference does it make? The issues remain the issues. The stakes remain the stakes. Voters have to know who they are voting for. When did it become so all important to know, and they don't know who was going to win or who is ahead? By the way, no one's ahead because it's not like a horse race where you can stop now and determine a winner. The race hasn't begun. There is no ahead in the race. You count all the votes, and even early in the evening, no one is ahead because it's just random which votes come in where. So the language, the description is completely illogical, is completely ill-founded. And we would be so better served if instead of a poll a week, the New York Times was running an in-depth dive on each aspect of 2025. Instead of those 3 or 4 stories that each poll generates, if you had substantive, hard-hitting news reporting about the issues, about the stakes, the electorate would be so much better informed. But that is expensive, that's difficult, and it doesn't necessarily get the clicks that they want to drive their business. Now, you asked about women in politics. I had one of the wonderful things that I so enjoyed about doing this book was the opportunity to talk to so many women political scientists who have studied this, who have studied women in politics. There's a phenomenal institute at Rutgers University that studies women in politics. Other universities have them. And it's very interesting. Slowly, the American public has accepted women in legislative roles. And you've seen, Kathleen, much more so on the Democratic side, but slowly on the Republican side, more and more women running for office and winning. It has been a much harder road on the executive side of things. This notion of power, who holds power, who asserts authority, still is very tilted and very skewed towards a male version of power. Very few states in the United States have ever had a woman governor. That's extraordinary. They've never had a woman governor? No. And you think about it, New York City has never had a woman mayor. How is that even possible? But this idea of the one to exert authority, the one in charge of national security or public safety, is something that has been difficult to get across. But I think we are finally ready. For one thing, Kamala Harris has had the advantage of being in the vice president role. And the very end of my book, I got to write in at the last moment, was that inaugural day where she goes up to Arlington alongside the president to lay the wreath and to pay her respects. And that was literally a different image of power. Suddenly, it wasn't just a guy in a dark suit. It was this woman in this jewel-colored, ensemble walking up to the monument for the unknown soldier. And I thought to myself, this is literally changing how we see power, what the image of someone in power looks like. And I think because she has run such a really brilliant campaign and has shown such strength, I thought that Bret Baier interview was just a gift from the political gods. The way she handled him, the way she didn't get rattled, the way she showed him up by correcting his use of a clip. It just showed she is in command. She is a tough cookie. She has leaned into her role as a former prosecutor, as an attorney general. She has been absolutely no nonsense about the border. She's been absolutely resolute on Ukraine. And she has not made a big deal about her gender. When she's asked about it, she says the very obvious things. Perhaps it wasn't so obvious at the time. And that is, everybody can see I'm a woman. They get that. I don't have to talk about that. I have to give them a sense of satisfaction that they will trust me. They understand I'm working for them. I see them, and they will make their decision based on that. That is so smart. And when you think about it, there has been relatively little conversation in comparison to what it was with Hillary, and focus on the first woman president. And if things go the way I think they will go, we will have our first woman president. And I think she rides on the shoulders of not only Hillary Clinton, but Shirley Chisholm, and Geraldine Ferraro, and every woman who came before us. But it's nutty in a way that the world's only superpower has never had a woman leader. Virtually all of our European allies at one point or another have had a woman prime minister. Now, not just like head of state, but they divide their government in a different way than we do. Britain has had a woman prime minister. Germany has had a woman prime minister. Italy right now has a woman prime minister. So it's about time we joined the modern era. And I think we are ready. And particularly because the vision of maleness that Donald Trump offers is so offensive and so grotesque and such a caricature of masculinity that I think not only has he revolted women, but I think a lot of men see him as a thug, a bully, a con man, frankly, a rapist, which was the effect of the civil verdict involving Eugene Carroll. So I think we are ready. And I think it's pretty amazing if things continue to go this way. I am not a gloom and doomer. I am cautiously optimistic about how the election will go.
He just looks like a carnival barker to me. But so why is there even a horse race? Why is there? I mean, like seriously, like you watch the debate, between them. You watch her speak. You listen to what she has to say. I just don't understand. I mean, what do you make of that?
I know, and I have tried to look at this from a different perspective, using in large part the work of a fellow by the name of Robert P. Jones, who heads PRRI. I really recommend him as a guest. He's a fascinating guy. And he has written about the demographic decline of white Christian Protestants. They used to be a majority of the country, and they ceased being a majority. And in fact, we're on our way to a minority majority country. This has freaked them out. This has caused a spasm of reactionary, populist, racist policy. And it is they
openly talk about deporting, tens of millions of asylum seekers and migrants.
Right. And they are playing into the fears, the resentments of a group of people who feel something was taken from them because they used to be important people. They used to be on top in the social economic arrangement. And now they're not. And they are all too ready to blame women, to blame minorities, to blame immigrants. And he has capitalized on this. And what we see statistically is the overlap of two really dangerous phenomena. One is about 30 to 35% of the American people have a inclination, a preference, a tendency towards authoritarianism. And you say, how is that even possible? There were two different formulas that social scientists devised in the post-World War II years because they wanted to understand how Europe fell under the sway of totalitarian dictators. And they asked questions that you think would be mind-boggling that anyone would answer in the affirmative. Questions like, we need a strong man to destroy my enemies, or if we don't get a strong person, democracy will lead us to ruin. Questions like that. Who would answer that in the affirmative? 30 to 35% of Americans answer those in the affirmative, and they make up a disproportionate amount of, wait for it, the Republican Party. At the same time, you have 30 to 35% of the population, turns out, there's an overlap of people who believe in white supremacy, white Christian nationalism, that this was a white Christian country, that other people, I suppose, are here at their behest, that there is a social order, a racial order to be preserved, that any pluralism, any tolerance of other faiths, other backgrounds, other cultures dilutes our Americanism. This is the great replacement theory. This is the desire that Christianity, rather than the Constitution, be the central guiding focus. This is Mike Johnson, who said the Bible is my guidebook, not the Constitution. And so what you have is these really two dangerous outlooks, authoritarianism and white Christian nationalism. They have mapped onto each other and they dominate a single political party, the Republican Party. And when that happens, and when you have a system that gives disproportionate power to thinly populated red states, and we have an electoral college, and we have a Senate that is anti-majoritarian, they have extremely oversized power. And that's why they're out to suppress the vote, because they don't want an electorate that's representative of the United States as it exists. They want a electorate that looks like 1940 or 1920 or 1890, because that's the only way they maintain control. So on one hand, I suppose it's good news that only 35% of Americans believe in authoritarianism. On the other hand, 35% of Americans believe in authoritarianism. This is horrible. And they have all glommed onto the same political party. And so they don't see Trump as detestable. They don't see Trump as awful. They see him as a champion, giving it to those other people, fighting for me, making sure everyone knows this is a white Christian country, and damn everyone else. And that's why you have this unbelievable prospect of someone who is spouting these things that are so antithetical to the Constitution, to American values, to pluralism, has a very good shot to be president. And we have to really look, first of all, at those two ideologies that are kind of running through America. But we also, frankly, have to look at a system that allows a minority of the party and of the population, rather, such disproportionate power. We have to look at the filibuster. We have to look at the Electoral College. We have to look at term limits for the Supreme Court. They've been able to hijack the system without a electoral, that is, a popular majority.
Yeah, I mean, there's supposed to be checks and balances, right? I mean, what what are the things? I mean, I'm dying to get to the Washington Post piece of this. I was one of the 250,000 people who canceled my subscription when the Post, a place that I often went to, was always my second place to go. The first has always been the New York Times. I live in New York. What can I say? And the second was always the Washington Post. And I canceled my subscription because I was so just appalled by it. But before we get there, what are the things that you're most concerned about, just in terms of these policies and the things that they're all saying? What are the things that are concerning you the most about some of these policies and the lack of checks and balances?
Well, in terms of Trump's agenda, any use of the military to quash dissent, the evisceration of a neutral civil service and putting lackeys in government, mass deportation of immigrants, putting them in camps and ejecting them, the Christianization of government, which is spelled out in 2025. These are all abhorrent. And talk about an economic disaster. Across the board, tariffs and politicization of the Federal Reserve, which he advocates, are just a recipe for disaster. And of course, on the international front, abandoning Ukraine, abandoning NATO will be disastrous. So from top to bottom, it's a disaster in the making. As far as the way to kind of correct some of these anomalies is, I think we need an injection of democracy, of majoritarianism. We need to make it easier to vote. We need to have paid time off to vote, or make voting possible on a Sunday rather than a Tuesday, or give us a national holiday. We need to replace partisan gerrymandering, which builds in minority parties, with neutral commissions that can draw lines that don't exaggerate the power of Republicans. We need to have term limits on the Supreme Court. I would be in favor of expanding the Supreme Court. Washington, D.C., and frankly, Puerto Rico, I think, have earned the right to become states and get senators and congressmen. All of these things have the effect of giving the majority more strength. In other words, we're being led around by the nose by an extreme, very well organized minority. And we have to remember, we're a country based on the popular will with protections for the minority, not a system that can be jerry-rigged for the minority to dominate, to control, and to oppress the rest of us. I frankly also think that it's time to figure out how we work around the Electoral College. There's a movement called the National Popular Vote Compact, which would have each state award their electors based upon the national popular vote outcome. So in essence, we would be having a popular vote. You could also do that obviously by constitutional amendment, which is much harder. We have to get rid of the filibuster. If the Democrats pull off a trifecta, they have to be willing to use power. Republicans use power very effectively. Democrats have to be able to use power too.
Wow. So, okay, now we're going to get to our next, the Washington Post. But first, we have to take our second ad break, and we'll come back and we're going to jump right into Jeff Bezos. Support for this episode comes from our new sponsor, Honeylove, which is amazing. They have the best bras and shapewear that I've ever worn. Not only is it so comfortable, it also lifts in all the right places while helping hide those little bumps and lumps, you know what I'm talking about, in all the areas that you need it. But most importantly, I love how comfortable it is, how cool it is, and how great I look and feel when I wear it. Their bras in particular are especially comfortable and supportive for all shapes and sizes, whether you're on the smaller side, you don't have to keep pulling it down. And for those women who need more support, they have you covered as well. This is a new product that I will not live without, whether it's for special occasions or every day. This is my go-to. They've revolutionized the wireless bra game, which is personally a pet peeve of mine. I hate the underwire, and their bras feature supportive bonding that eliminates the need for those uncomfortable wires and unnecessary bulk. So you deserve a bra that's lightweight, comfortable, without sacrificing support. Embrace freedom, flexibility, and comfort with Honeylove's wire-free bras made with fabric that's so soft you'll even forget that you're wearing it, so you won't want to just come home after a long day and immediately want to take your bra off. You do not sacrifice comfort, and they look great and they're comfortable. And I particularly love the crossover bra. It's so comfortable and it's sure to be your new go-to. So if you're tired of bras that cause bulging in the back, you will love their back smoothing fabric to prevent that bra bulge. So I like the, very relaxing kind of, there's a lounge bra also that I love. It's called the V bra, and it offers the support of a traditional bra without that uncomfortable underwire. So it lifts, it separates, and all of the things that you need. So it's great. Please give it a try, and they'll have you covered for every day, whether it's going to work or whether you're going out at night or to a wedding, whatever it is, try them. They're really great. So Honeylove is not just supporting women, it's empowering women. So treat yourself to the best bras on the market and save 20% off at honeylove.com/misstrial with 2 S's, MISS trial, and use our exclusive link to get 20% off. That's honeylove.com/mistrial to find your perfect fit. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, and please support our show. Thank you. All right, we're back. Jen, can I start with a clip that you posted? I'd love to start with just the beginning of it, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Play the clip.
Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. It's not often that me and my employer are in the center of a really big news story. In this case, it's the refusal of the Washington Post owner, Jeff Bezos, to endorse a presidential candidate. He joins the LA Times and USA Today and all of its affiliated papers in refusing to take sides in the most consequential election of our time. Let me say a few things about it. First of all, I do not believe the reasons stated. I don't believe he has suddenly decided that we should endorse everybody except presidential candidates, and that of all the elections, this is the one to start with this new policy. We endorsed a presidential candidate in 2020. No problem. And I perceive this And even if it's not intended, it is inevitably perceived as bending the knee to Donald Trump. At the worst possible moment, when democracy is on the line, you have a billionaire who has a business aside from the Post that does business with the federal government, deciding not to run afoul of a man who has declared war on democracy and on the free press. And I still find it absolutely inconceivable that someone who owns a newspaper would do this. First of all, the number of cancellations, and this is not inside information, it's been published elsewhere, is now up to 250,000. How could you not understand what the Washington Post means to the public? We are not only a reliable source of news, but people look to us because they care what we think on the opinion side. They want to have some moral clarity. They want to have some political clarity. And depriving them of that severs a bond and a level of trust that has been built up over decades. And it breaks my heart to read these emails expressing their love for the paper and frankly for my own work, but saying they cannot in good conscience continue to subscribe. How could you not understand the damage to the brand, what you were dealing with, what you were entrusted with when you make a decision like that? But nevertheless, that was the decision that was made. And I am equally troubled by the fact that the reason given was not candid, was not accurate.
Wow. So that, I mean, it goes on.
Right.
It goes on for another, I think, 7 minutes or so. But wow, I mean, first of all, the courage.
Yeah, to call that out. Yeah.
To call that out and call your boss, frankly, because he owns the paper. He coined the phrase, right? Democracy dies in darkness. And to call him out publicly. And I mean, what's
behind it? What do you think is behind his decision, Jen?
I've been candid. I think it's because he doesn't want to offend Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst explanation is that he actually likes this guy. The worst explanation is that he thinks he's terrific, and that we are owned by someone who has no regard for democracy and the free press and all the rest of it. I find it hard to fathom that that is the case. If that is the case, it is far, far worse for the Washington Post and for American journalism. But if you think that's not the reason, if you think he simply didn't want to offend Donald Trump, then this is what I have described, and I read about this yesterday when I interviewed a whole number of international dissidents, is what we call self-censorship or obedience in advance. Totalitarian figures count on people towing the line, pulling their punches before oppression even hits, before they're even punished, before anyone is threatened with jail, that simply the specter of loss of financial wherewithal, of social standing, of political freedoms, even the hint of that makes people buckle at the knees and comply. And that is what is so dangerous, because not only does the authoritarian get away with suppressing the free press, but he avoids any responsibility for having destroyed the free media because they've done it to themselves. He can say very truthfully, I didn't tell Jeff Bezos not to endorse anyone. He made that decision. So it's the worst kind of decision at the worst possible time. I have to say, I am not alone in this. Many of my colleagues joined in an immediate response. I think the number's up to 20. That was, to their credit, published in the paper that objects to this. A number of columnists, Ruth Marcus, Dana Milbank, Alexander Pitre, have all responded with columns condemning the move. So I'm not the only one here. There are many of us out there. But as I said, I was at unrelated, well, it's related to democracy, but unrelated to the Washington Post. I was at a symposium at Brookings on Monday, and our mutual friend, Norm Eisen, who was heading the panel, asked a similar question. He says, do you feel uncomfortable doing this? And maybe it's because I came to journalism late in life. Maybe it's because I am just so ornery. But what would be the point if I didn't say what I believe? What would be the point of what I'm doing? The only thing that gives it any meaning is that I'm able to call it like I see it. People can agree, people can disagree. But if I am not being candid about this, how will people take my views of other things? Unlike Jeff Bezos, who doesn't understand that deceit, lying, forbearance in one area affects everything else. I do. You cannot pull your punch if you're not going to get readers to believe that you're being candid elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reporting has been that the Post had their endorsement for Kamala Harris written. It was drafted. It was ready to go.
Yes.
That the Post has always endorsed candidates, like most newspapers, if not all newspapers, that this was just sort of a standard thing, and that Jeff Bezos himself intervened and then said, we're not going to endorse anybody. It was a few days, I think it was like a week before the election, right? And it's the timing of it that I think a lot of people are suspect, because the reason he gave was he thinks he wants the newspaper to not look biased, he gave sort of this reasoning about how a newspaper shouldn't tip the scales of an election, and they want to not look biased, but the timing is what a lot of people have been criticizing. But you took it a little, you took it, the reason it took such courage is you actually are calling him a liar. You're saying his stated reason that he put on the Washington Post, that it was this, desire to be neutral. You said that you called him a liar, essentially, less than candid. You're essentially saying it's not true.
Well, put it this way. It was either deliberately untrue, or it was horribly naive to think that people wouldn't have taken it this way. And when you're saying or doing something that people are going to interpret a certain way, you have a responsibility when you utter that nevertheless. If you make a controversial statement and because you're a thinking human being, that people are going to take this, as maybe direction to march up to the Capitol and create violence. Whether that is your intention or not, you have responsibility once words are uttered or not are uttered. You have to, as a public figure, take responsibility for your actions and what you say. And if you were simply clueless about how people would take it, then you were nevertheless, what we say, reckless disregard of how people were going to react to it. So whether this was a deliberate lie, whether he's talked himself into believing the rationale, whether he is just incredibly naive beyond any belief, whatever the reason is, we have done something that's broken trust with our readers. And the proof is in the pudding. Hundreds of thousands of subscriptions canceled. This has never happened in the history of American journalism, that a single decision like this has caused such a gusher of cancellations. Now, I do want to make one other point, and that is he said something in his subsequent editorial, which I took extremely hard exception to. He said that an editorial gives the impression that we're biased. Well, if that's the case, why do we endorse other races? Why do we have an opinion section altogether?
That's the whole point of an opinion section.
Exactly. And as both of you know, papers have always had a separation between news and opinion.
Absolutely.
If that's really your belief, if you think people can't understand that distinction like they have for decades, then why do you have an opinion section? Why is he employing us at all? I don't get that. And because he has essentially said, not only in his words, do we not matter? He says, an endorsement doesn't matter. Well, it matters to 250,000 people, but it doesn't matter. But the implication is the opinion section is a drag on what he thinks is the newspaper's credibility. I'll tell you what's a drag on the newspaper's credibility was this decision. And the proof is in the pudding.
Jen, can I just jump into your piece that you wrote yesterday? The U.S. can learn from other countries' encounters with fascism. I hope it's a must read. But one of the people that you interviewed was Garry Kasparov, the former world chess champion, and I just want to read what he said to you. You mentioned before about the anticipatory response among U.S. business leaders to a possible Trump election worries Garry Kasparov. And what he said to you was, what's truly shocking is that we are seeing it happen in America preemptively. Elites imagine that they can bargain with the dictator, but the dictator's personal interest always wins out. They think they can buy the dictator, but there's always a higher bidder. They think they can learn to live with the dictator, but there are no patterns of behavior to study, just arbitrary abuse. I mean, that to me is at the essence of this. And whether it's Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, it's just outrageous that they are taking these positions. And I just think, again, kudos to you for standing up and putting that out there, because a lot of people just kind of might say it in the privacy of their own home, but they don't put it out there and call this out for what it appears to be.
I was so moved by what Garry has to say. Yeah. And of course, he comes with this moral authority of having been punished in the gulag, that it really resonates. And what that experience of talking to all these people also emphasize is how much America matters in the world. This doesn't just affect the Washington Post or the American media or even just America. It affects people around the world, from the people that I was interviewing in Zimbabwe, in Nicaragua, care what we say and what we do, because that's how they defend themselves against their oppressive regimes. They look to America and say, see, if the Washington Post can stand up to Donald Trump, then I can stand up to my strong man in my country. And if we don't, we're letting them down.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, the thing is, these billionaires, our country has created an economic system of where people can become billionaires. And that's partly why people want to come to this country, because there's hope. There's hope that this could be me too. I could have that. I mean, that's, but as a result, they have an outsized responsibility, I think, to not let this country fall into hands like Donald Trump. I mean, the fact that both Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have their, they all love their rocket ships, these billionaires. And so we have Blue Origin, or you have SpaceX, they have these government contracts, right? They have billions in government contracts. It's actually in their financial interest for
him to be elected.
For Trump to be elected, or at least not to piss him off, right? And so that just, to me, it's like, okay, you already have your billions. Like, even like, what more do you need, right? Why can't you stand up? Why can't you?
What they don't understand, or what they delude themselves into misunderstanding, is they became billionaires because America was here for them. It was a democracy. We had the rule of law. We had free markets. We had market regulation. We had an educated workforce. To quote Barack Obama, they didn't build it, or they didn't build it on their own. They did it in the context of the American experience. Put it this way, they never could have done it someplace else. And rather than regarding this country with gratitude, they have turned around and in essence said, I don't need that. No one needs that. I did it on my own. You didn't do it on your own. You did it because you're a citizen of the United States, and the United States government, with all its faults, has allowed you to become a billionaire. And I don't mean allowed as in it didn't take away your riches. I mean, given you the resources, the opportunity, the legal structure, the economic structure to succeed. And this is how you repay us? I feel the same way about Rupert Murdoch, by the way. You came to this country and this is what you do with it? This is what you do with your billions? This is how you repay us? For me, it is the quintessential example of arrogance and ingratitude. But as I say, and I don't want to leave us on a totally negative note, the Washington Post does go on. There is great reporting that is still being done there. Yesterday's editorial, I haven't seen today's, just ripping Trump on his language and his vulgarity and his abuse is, I think, right on the money. The problem is that we've lost credibility with the public now. And how we get that back, I don't know. We all know in our personal lives that once you've done something that shattered trust or credibility, it is really hard to get it back because people will say, I just don't believe you. You lied to me once or you let me down once. How do I know you won't do it again? And I don't know how you do that. I really don't. And I'm not being facetious about it. I have never experienced something like this. And perhaps I need to go look at some business studies about how corporations have dealt with self-made disasters. But this is one of them. This is a self-made disaster.
Well, Jen, we are this has been such an unbelievable hour that you have given us, and we are so grateful. You're fascinating. I could listen to you talk for all day long. And I want to ask you 1,000 other questions.
Well, hopefully we can have you back after the election to talk about, okay, regardless of the outcome, where do we go from here?
Absolutely. You're on. Thank you so much, ladies. And I appreciate so much what you do. I think the media is changing. And I think for what you guys are doing and for the parent company that is making this possible, this is, I think, how American journalism is going to look and how it's going to survive, because you guys are totally independent. You speak your mind and you speak from an informed, educated perspective. And that's what we need. That's what the media has to do, is hold people of power accountable by people who know what's going on and people who can see what they're up to. So thank you. Thank you both.
You, Jen. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for being here. This was such a delight. Thank you.
So great.
My pleasure.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the Midas Touch newsletter at MidasTouch.com/newsletter.